The fall of the dictator. For years, the people of the small island nation of Maldonia had lived under the rule of a tyrannical dictator named General Perez. He had seized power in a coup, promising to restore order and prosperity to the nation, but instead he had used his position to enrich himself and his cronies at the expense of the rest of the population. The people had grown weary of his corruption and oppression, but they had been too afraid to speak out or take action. That is, until a group of young activists decided to take matters into their own hands. The group, calling themselves the Maldonian Resistance, began by staging peaceful protests in the streets, holding signs and chanting slogans calling for freedom and democracy. General Perez's security forces responded with violence, beating and arresting the protesters, but this only fueled the fire of the resistance. They began to recruit more members, spreading their message of hope and resistance through social media and word of mouth. As the resistance grew in size and strength, General Perez became increasingly paranoid and desperate. He ordered his forces to crack down even harder on the protesters, and he began to publicly accuse them of being foreign agents and terrorists. He even went so far as to stage a fake assassination attempt on himself, blaming it on the resistance in an attempt to justify his brutal tactics. But the people of Maldonia were not fooled. They knew that General Perez was the real enemy, and they began to organize in secret. They formed militias, hiding weapons and supplies in safe houses and underground bunkers. They trained in guerrilla warfare, learning how to move silently and strike quickly, to evade capture and keep their enemies off balance. The resistance knew that they could not defeat General Perez's army head-on, so they began to plan a different kind of attack. They focused on disrupting the regime's infrastructure, cutting off supply lines and sabotaging key installations. They spread disinformation, planting false leads and decoys to throw the enemy off their trail. They hacked into government databases, stealing and leaking sensitive information to expose the regime's corruption and crimes. As the resistance gained momentum, General Perez grew increasingly isolated and paranoid. He began to execute even his own loyal officers, accusing them of disloyalty and plotting against him. His security forces became more brutal and indiscriminate, rounding up innocent civilians and torturing them for information. But the resistance remained undaunted, continuing to strike back in small, strategic ways. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The resistance had planned a massive coordinated attack on General Perez's palace, targeting the dictator himself. They knew it was risky, but they also knew it was their best chance to end the regime once and for all. They rallied their forces and made their way towards the palace under cover of darkness, using a combination of stealth and diversion tactics to avoid detection. As they approached the palace, they encountered heavy resistance from General Perez's remaining loyalists. There was fierce fighting in the streets, with both sides taking heavy losses. But the resistance fought on, their determination and courage fueling their adrenaline. They pressed forward, taking out one enemy stronghold after another, until they finally reached the gates of the palace. There, they encountered General Perez himself, surrounded by his remaining guards. He sneered at them, confident in his own invincibility. But the resistance had a surprise in store for him. They had smuggled in a small drone equipped with explosives, which they detonated just outside the palace gates. The explosion was powerful enough to knock down the walls of the palace, creating a gaping hole through which the resistance stormed in. General Perez's remaining guards fought fiercely, but they were no match. Thanks for watching.